Sometimes the most profound moments of respect happen in the most ordinary places. Picture this: a young Navy seaman, barely 21, trembling hands gripping a coffee pot in the most secure briefing room of the Pentagon. Around the mahogany table sit the most powerful military minds in America. Admirals with decades of experience, generals who've commanded thousands, and intelligence officials who hold the nation's secrets. But when Admiral Richardson's voice cuts through the tension-filled air with 4 simple words, "Stand for the SEAL," everything changes. The coffee cup clatters against its saucer. The room falls silent. And suddenly, this isn't just about serving refreshments anymore. This is the true story of Petty Officer Marcus Chun, whose routine morning assignment became a lesson in honor, sacrifice, and the unbreakable bonds that define military brotherhood. What happened in that briefing room on a cold Tuesday morning in 2019 would challenge everything Marcus thought he knew about rank, respect, and what it truly means to serve. Because sometimes, the most important battles aren't fought on distant shores. They're fought in the quiet moments when we choose to see beyond ourselves and recognize the extraordinary courage that walks among us, often in the most unexpected forms. The alarm clock's shrill cry pierced through the darkness of Marcus Chin's small apartment at 0430 hours. 3 years into his Navy service, the 21-year-old petty officer third class had grown accustomed to early mornings, but today felt different. As he stumbled toward the bathroom, something in the air seemed charged with anticipation, though he couldn't quite put his finger on what it was. Marcus had been stationed at the Pentagon for 8 months now, an assignment that most of his fellow sailors envied. While they were deployed on ships or stationed at remote bases, he worked in the heart of American military power. But the reality was far less glamorous than people imagined. His days were filled with mundane tasks, delivering documents, setting up conference rooms, and yes, serving coffee to high-ranking officials who barely acknowledged his existence. After a quick shower and donning his crisp Navy utilities, Marcus made his way through the still dark streets of Arlington. The Pentagon loomed before him like a concrete fortress, its 5 sides disappearing into the pre-dawn shadows. Security checkpoints, multiple ID verifications, and the familiar routine of entering one of the world's most secure buildings had become second nature to him. "Chun," Chief Petty Officer Williams called out as Marcus entered the administrative offices. "You're on briefing room duty today. Room 3 times 10 to the power of negative 958. High-level meetings starting at 0800. Marcus nodded, though his heart sank slightly. Briefing room duty meant standing at attention for hours, refreshing coffee, and being invisible while important people made important decisions. It wasn't exactly what he had envisioned when he enlisted, dreaming of adventure and meaningful service to his country. "Any special instructions, Chief?" Marcus asked, straightening his uniform. "Just the usual. Look sharp, keep quiet, and remember, you're representing the Navy. These aren't your typical morning meetings. We're talking flag officers, Pentagon brass, and some people whose names you won't recognize, but whose clearance levels would make your head spin." Williams paused, giving Marcus a serious look. "And Chun, today's meeting is classified. What you hear, see, or serve coffee to stays in that room." "Understood." "Yes, Chief. Understood." As Marcus made his way through the Pentagon's maze-like corridors, he thought about his journey to this moment. Growing up in San Francisco's Chinatown, he had watched his immigrant parents work 16-hour days in their small restaurant, never complaining, always pushing him to pursue education and opportunities they never had. When he chose military service over college, they had been disappointed, but ultimately supportive. "You honor our family by serving your country," his father had said on the day Marcus left for boot camp. "But remember, son, true honor comes not from what others can do for you, but from what you can do for others." Those words echoed in his mind as he approached room 3 times 10 to the power of negative 958. The briefing room was larger than most, with a polished mahogany conference table surrounded by high-backed leather chairs. Multiple screens lined the walls, currently dark, but ready to display classified information. The room smelled of leather, coffee, and the faint scent of the wood polish used to maintain the furniture. Marcus began his pre-meeting routine. He checked the coffee service station, ensuring the industrial-grade coffee maker was clean and functioning. He arranged cups, saucers, cream, sugar, and artificial sweeteners with military precision. Ice water pitchers were filled and placed at strategic intervals around the table. He tested the microphone system and ensured all chairs were positioned correctly. By 07:45, everything was perfect. Marcus took his position near the coffee station, hands clasped behind his back, eyes forward. Soon, the room began to fill with the most powerful people in American military and intelligence circles. Admiral Richardson entered first, his four-star insignia catching the fluorescent light. Marcus had served him coffee before. The Admiral preferred it black, no sugar, and always said thank you, even though military protocol didn't require it. Following him came a parade of stars and eagles, Air Force generals, Army commanders, Navy admirals, and several civilians whose unassuming appearance couldn't hide the authority they wielded. Marcus recognized some faces from previous meetings, but others were new to him. There was something about today's gathering that felt heavier than usual. Conversations were hushed, faces more serious than typical. Documents marked with red classification stamps were placed around the table with unusual care. Gentlemen, ladies, Admiral Richardson began as the room settled into an expectant silence. Today's briefing concerns Operation Neptune's Reach, a mission that concluded successfully last month. We're here to discuss lessons learned, commendations, and his voice softened slightly to honor the extraordinary service of those who made ultimate sacrifices. Marcus maintained his position but felt a chill run down his spine. Operation Neptune's Reach. He'd heard whispers about it in the corridors. A counterterrorism mission somewhere in the Middle East. Classified details, of course, but the kind of operation that either went perfectly or went terribly wrong. As the Admiral opened a classified folder, Marcus noticed something he'd never seen before in these high-level meetings. Several of the most senior officers, men and women who commanded thousands and had decades of combat experience, had tears in their eyes. Not obvious tears. These were professional military leaders, but the kind of barely contained emotion that spoke of profound loss and pride intermingled. The mission was successful, Admiral Richardson continued, his voice steady, but carrying an undertone that suggested the cost of that success. Terrorist leadership was eliminated, American hostages were recovered, and our forces returned safely. With one exception, the room fell completely silent. Marcus could hear the hum of the air conditioning, the distant sound of traffic from the Pentagon's parking areas, and his own heartbeat. He had served in enough of these meetings to know when something significant was about to be revealed. Petty Officer First Class Daniel Rodriguez, United States Navy SEAL, was killed in action during the final phase of the operation. His actions saved the lives of his teammates and ensured mission success. Today, we review the circumstances of his heroism and discuss the posthumous honors he will receive. Marcus felt his breath catch. He had never personally known anyone killed in combat, though he knew it was an ever-present reality in military service. But hearing it discussed here, in this room, made it suddenly real in a way that news reports and statistics never could. Admiral Richardson gestured to an aide who activated one of the wall screens. A photograph appeared. A young man in Navy dress blues, probably not much older than Marcus himself. Petty Officer Rodriguez had kind eyes and the confident smile of someone who believed in what he was doing. The photo was followed by a service record, multiple deployments, commendations for valor, and a list of qualifications that spoke of years of intensive training and dedication. Rodriguez was 26 years old, the Admiral continued, married with a 2-year-old daughter. He had been with SEAL Team 6 for 3 years and was considered one of their most promising operators. On the night of September 15th, his team was tasked with extracting 3 American aid workers who had been captured by terrorist forces in Syria. The briefing continued with tactical details that were largely beyond Marcus's understanding, but the human cost was crystal clear. As military leaders discussed rules of engagement, intelligence gathering, and mission parameters, Marcus found himself staring at the photograph of Petty Officer Rodriguez. Here was a man who had voluntarily placed himself in harm's way, not for glory or recognition, but for the simple principle that American citizens in danger deserved protection. He had trained for years, sacrificed time with family, and ultimately given his life so that 3 strangers could return home safely. Marcus thought about his own service, the comfortable Pentagon assignment, the routine duties, the safety of his position thousands of miles from any combat zone. For the first time since enlisting, he felt a complex mixture of gratitude and guilt. Grateful for his safety, but somehow guilty that others like Rodriguez bore the real burden of military service while he served coffee to generals. The extraction was successful, Admiral Richardson was saying. All 3 hostages were recovered alive and unharmed. Rodriguez's actions during the final phase of the operation were consistent with the highest traditions of the United States Navy and the Special Operations community. An Air Force general leaned forward. "Admiral, I've read the after-action reports. Rodriguez had already been wounded but refused evacuation. He remained in position to provide covering fire for his team and the rescued hostages. Is that correct?" "That's correct." Rodriguez took shrapnel from an improvised explosive device during the initial breach. His team leader ordered him to fall back for medical attention, but Rodriguez declined. He said, and I quote from his team leader's report, "These people are going home today. Whatever it takes." The room remained silent as the implications of those words settled over everyone present. Marcus felt something shift inside him. This wasn't just a briefing about a military operation. It was a testament to what service really meant. Not the ceremonies, the uniforms, or the prestige, but the willingness to place others' welfare above your own safety. Another screen illuminated, showing tactical maps and timelines that Marcus couldn't fully interpret. But he could understand the basic story. A small team of highly trained warriors entering a hostile environment to save innocent lives, and one of them choosing to make the ultimate sacrifice to ensure his mission succeeded. Rodriguez maintained his position for 47 minutes after being wounded, the Admiral continued. During that time, he engaged multiple enemy fighters and coordinated air support that allowed his team and the hostages to reach the extraction point safely. He was killed by sniper fire in the final minutes of the operation, just as the evacuation helicopter was departing. Marcus noticed that several officers were no longer trying to hide their emotions. These were battle-hardened veterans who had seen combat in multiple theaters. Yet they were clearly moved by the story of Rodriguez's sacrifice. It spoke to something fundamental about military service, the bonds between those who serve and the respect for those who give everything for others. The briefing continued with discussions of tactics, equipment performance, and intelligence accuracy. But Marcus found his attention drifting back to that photograph. Rodriguez looked so young, so alive, so confident. It was impossible to reconcile that vibrant image with the knowledge that he was gone, that his wife was now a widow, his daughter would grow up without her father. As the morning progressed, Marcus performed his duties mechanically, refilling coffee cups, replacing water pitchers, adjusting chairs as officers stepped away for urgent phone calls. But his mind was elsewhere, grappling with questions he had never seriously considered before. What made someone like Rodriguez volunteer for the most dangerous assignments? How did military families cope with the constant possibility of loss? What did it really mean to serve your country when that service might cost you everything? During a brief recess, as senior officers stepped into the hallway for private conversations, Marcus found himself alone in the room with Admiral Richardson. The Admiral was studying documents, making notes in the margins, completely absorbed in his work. For a moment, Marcus considered approaching him, maybe asking about Rodriguez or expressing his appreciation for the briefing. But military protocol was clear. Junior enlisted personnel didn't initiate conversations with flag officers unless specifically invited to do so. Marcus remained at his station, silent and professional. But Admiral Richardson looked up, seeming to sense his presence. For a moment, their eyes met across the room. The Admiral's expression was unreadable, professional, focused, but somehow also compassionate. It was the look of a leader who understood the weight of command and the cost of the decisions made in rooms like this one. "Son," Admiral Richardson said quietly, "you've been very professional today." "Thank you. Just doing my job, sir," Marcus replied, maintaining military bearing. The Admiral nodded slowly. "Yes, you are. And that matters more than you might realize." Before Marcus could respond, the other officers began returning to the room. The moment passed, but something about that brief exchange stayed with him. It wasn't just politeness. There had been something deeper in the Admiral's words, a recognition that every role in military service, no matter how small it might seem, was part of something larger. As the briefing resumed, Marcus found himself viewing everything differently. These weren't just high-ranking officials discussing policy. They were leaders grappling with the human cost of the decisions they made. Every operation authorized, every mission approved, had the potential to create more stories like Rodriguez's. The weight of that responsibility was evident in their careful deliberations, their detailed questions, their obvious respect for those who carried out their orders. The morning session concluded with plans for Rodriguez's funeral arrangements and discussions about the posthumous decorations he would receive. There was talk of the Silver Star, the Purple Heart, and other honors that seemed inadequate compensation for a life given in service to others. As the officers filed out for lunch, leaving classified documents secured and discussions tabled until the afternoon session, Marcus remained behind to reset the room. But he moved more slowly than usual, still processing everything he had witnessed. The photograph of Rodriguez remained on the screen, a constant reminder of the reality behind the statistics and operational reports. For 3 years, Marcus had served in the Navy without truly understanding what service meant. He had seen it as a job, a stepping stone to civilian career opportunities, a way to honor his family's immigrant story. But today, in this briefing room surrounded by the echoes of Rodriguez's sacrifice, he began to grasp something deeper. Service wasn't about personal advancement or even patriotic duty in the abstract. It was about being part of something larger than yourself, something that required ordinary people to do extraordinary things when circumstances demanded it. As Marcus prepared fresh coffee for the afternoon session, he found himself thinking about Rodriguez's last words. "These people are going home today, whatever it takes." The simple certainty of that statement, the absolute commitment to mission success regardless of personal cost, represented a level of dedication that Marcus had never personally tested. He wondered if he would measure up if faced with such a choice. Would he have the courage to put others first when everything was on the line? The question troubled him because he honestly didn't know the answer. But for the first time since enlisting, he understood that military service was fundamentally about preparing for that test, even if you hoped it never came. The afternoon session would bring new revelations, but already Marcus Chun had been changed by what he had witnessed. The briefing room, with its polished table and classified discussions, had become a classroom where he learned that heroism isn't reserved for special people. It's a choice available to anyone willing to place service above self when the moment demands it. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a new understanding was taking shape, that every person in uniform, from the newest recruit to the most senior general, was connected by the shared possibility of being called upon to make that choice. It was a sobering realization, but also somehow inspiring. In a world full of uncertainty, there was something powerful about being part of an organization bound together by such a fundamental commitment to others. The afternoon session was scheduled to begin at 1,300 hours, but by 12:45, Marcus had noticed something unusual happening in the corridor outside the briefing room. There was more security than normal. Additional personnel he didn't recognize, wearing suits rather than uniforms, with the careful alertness that suggested Secret Service or similar high-level protection details. Chief Williams appeared in the doorway, his expression more serious than Marcus had seen all morning. "Chun, we've got some changes to the afternoon roster. There's going to be an additional attendee, someone who specifically requested to be present for the Rodriguez discussion." "Yes, Chief. Do you need me to adjust the room setup?" Williams paused, studying Marcus carefully. "The additional attendee is Rodriguez's widow, Mrs. Elena Rodriguez. She'll be accompanied by a Navy chaplain and a casualty assistance officer. This is highly unusual. Family members typically aren't present for operational briefings. But she specifically requested to hear the details of her husband's final mission." Marcus felt his stomach tighten. Throughout the morning, Rodriguez had been a name, a photograph, a service record. The idea of his widow sitting in this same room, hearing the clinical details of how her husband died, made everything suddenly and painfully personal. "She's also bringing someone else," Williams continued. "Rodriguez's father-in-law, Master Chief Petty Officer Robert Martinez, retired. He served 30 years in the Navy, including multiple deployments with Special Operations Forces. Mrs. Rodriguez wanted someone with military experience present who could help her understand the technical aspects of the briefing." The implications hit Marcus immediately. This wasn't just going to be a continuation of the morning's operational analysis. With Rodriguez's family present, every word would carry emotional weight that went far beyond tactical considerations. The senior officers would be speaking directly to the people most affected by the sacrifice they were discussing. "Chief, is there anything special I should know about protocol for this?" Williams looked thoughtful. "Just be extra professional, Chun. These people have been through hell. Mrs. Rodriguez lost her husband 2 months ago, and she's still dealing with all the bureaucratic aftermath that military families face when someone is killed in action. The last thing she needs is any additional stress or confusion." As the afternoon participants began arriving, Marcus noticed the change in atmosphere immediately. Conversations were more subdued, handshakes more solemn. The morning had been about tactical analysis and lessons learned. The afternoon was going to be about honoring a fallen warrior in the presence of those who loved him most. Admiral Richardson entered first, followed by the same group of senior officers from the morning session. But their demeanor had shifted noticeably. These were experienced leaders who had delivered death notifications to military families, who understood the delicate balance between honoring sacrifice and providing closure for those left behind. At precisely 1,300 hours, the door opened again, and Marcus saw Mrs. Elena Rodriguez for the first time. She was younger than he had expected, probably in her mid-20s, with dark hair pulled back in a simple style and wearing a conservative black dress. Her composure was remarkable. She walked with quiet dignity, but Marcus could see the strain in her eyes, the careful control that spoke of grief still being processed. Beside her walked a man who could only be Master Chief Martinez. Even in civilian clothes, his military bearing was unmistakable. He was probably in his 50s, with gray hair and the weathered appearance of someone who had spent decades in challenging environments. But what struck Marcus most was the protective way he stayed close to his daughter-in-law, offering support without being overbearing. The Navy chaplain and casualty assistance officer flanked them, professional and respectful, but clearly there to provide whatever support might be needed during what was certain to be an emotionally difficult session. Admiral Richardson rose as they entered, followed immediately by every other officer in the room. It was a mark of respect that Marcus had never seen in previous briefings. Senior military leaders standing to honor not just the fallen warrior, but the family he had left behind. "Mrs. Rodriguez, Master Chief Martinez," Admiral Richardson said formally, "thank you for being here today. I know this isn't easy, but your presence honors Danny's service and helps us better understand the human cost of the missions we authorize." Elena Rodriguez nodded, her voice steady when she replied, "Admiral, I need to understand what happened to my husband. Not just that he died serving his country, but how and why. Danny always said that if anything happened to him, he wanted me to know the whole truth, not just the sanitized version they tell families. The rawness in her words hit everyone in the room. Marcus could see senior officers, people accustomed to making life and death decisions, struggling with the immediate human consequences of those choices. Master Chief Martinez spoke next, his voice carrying the authority of 3 decades of military service. Admiral, Elena has been dealing with a lot of people telling her what a hero Danny was, but not many willing to explain exactly what that heroism looked like. She deserves to know the details. Admiral Richardson nodded gravely. You'll have them, all of them. But I want to warn you, some of what we discussed today will be difficult to hear. Combat situations are chaotic and violent, and Danny's final actions took place under extreme circumstances. I understand, sir, Elena replied. But Danny was my husband. I shared his life, his dreams, his dedication to the Navy, and his team. I think I can handle hearing about his death. The chaplain leaned forward slightly. Elena, remember that you can ask to step out at any time. There's no requirement that you hear everything, and there's no shame in taking breaks when you need them. She shook her head firmly. Respectfully, Chaplain, Danny didn't get to take breaks when things got difficult. I won't either. As the participants settled around the conference table, Marcus noticed the careful choreography involved in accommodating the family members. Elena was seated where she could see the briefing screens clearly, but wouldn't be directly facing the more graphic tactical displays. Master Chief Martinez positioned himself where he could observe both the briefing materials and his daughter-in-law's reactions. Admiral Richardson began by reviewing the basic mission parameters that had been covered in the morning session, but his presentation was now tailored for an audience that included people without detailed tactical knowledge. The complexity was simplified without being condescending, and the focus shifted from analytical lessons learned to the human story of what had happened. The mission began on September 15th at 2,200 hours local time. Admiral Richardson explained, using a laser pointer to highlight locations on a tactical map. Danny's team consisted of 8 operators, all highly experienced SEAL personnel. Their objective was to locate and extract 3 American aid workers who had been captured by terrorist forces approximately 1 week earlier. Elena listened intently, occasionally asking questions that revealed both her intelligence and her determination to understand every aspect of her husband's final mission. Admiral, when you say extract, what exactly does that mean in practical terms? How does a team of 8 people get into a hostile area, find specific individuals, and get them out safely? The question led to a detailed explanation of special operations planning, intelligence gathering, and the careful coordination required for such missions. Master Chief Martinez supplemented the Admiral's explanations with his own experience, helping Elena understand the military terminology and tactical concepts. Marcus found himself deeply moved by Elena's courage and determination. Here was a young woman who could have chosen to remember her husband through the comfortable abstractions of heroism and sacrifice. Instead, she was insisting on confronting the brutal realities of how he had lived and died. It spoke to a strength of character that matched her husband's willingness to face danger for others. The initial insertion went according to plan, Admiral Richardson continued. Danny's team was able to approach the target location undetected and establish surveillance positions. Intelligence had indicated that the hostages were being held in a compound approximately 40 kilometers from the Syrian border. A new screen displayed satellite imagery of the target area, a collection of buildings in an arid landscape that looked utterly ordinary except for the armed guards visible in the photographs. Marcus realized that this was where Petty Officer Rodriguez had spent his final hours, moving through these same buildings in the darkness. The rescue operation itself was complicated by several factors, Admiral Richardson explained. First, the terrorists had moved the hostages to a different building than our intelligence had indicated. Second, they had significantly more personnel on site than expected. And third, they had prepared defensive positions that suggested they were expecting some kind of response. Elena's questions became more pointed as the briefing progressed. Admiral, are you saying that the terrorists knew we were coming? That Danny and his team walked into a trap. The question hung in the air for a moment before Admiral Richardson responded carefully. We don't believe the specific mission was compromised, Mrs. Rodriguez. But the terrorist organization had clearly prepared for the possibility of a rescue attempt. They had taken precautions that made the operation significantly more dangerous than originally planned. Master Chief Martinez leaned forward. Admiral, with respect, what Elena is asking is whether her husband died because of an intelligence failure or operational security breach. That's a fair question. It is a fair question, Master Chief, and one we've investigated thoroughly. Our conclusion is that no specific intelligence was compromised, but the terrorist organization was more sophisticated and better prepared than our initial assessments indicated. That's not an excuse. It's an explanation of the environment Danny and his teammates entered. The technical discussion continued, but Marcus could see the emotional toll it was taking on Elena. She maintained her composure, but her hands were clenched in her lap, and she had grown very still in a way that suggested intense concentration mixed with barely controlled emotion. The breakthrough moment came when Admiral Richardson reached the critical phase of the mission, the actual rescue attempt. At 0145 hours, Danny's team began their approach to the building where the hostages were being held. The plan called for a simultaneous breach from multiple entry points, with Danny and his partner responsible for the north entrance. Elena interrupted. Admiral, who was Danny's partner? I'd like to know who was with him at the end. Petty Officer First Class James Thompson. He and Danny had worked together for over 2 years. Thompson was wounded during the initial breach, but survived and has provided detailed statements about Danny's actions. For the first time since entering the room, Elena's careful control wavered slightly. The knowledge that someone had been there, had witnessed her husband's final moments, and survived to tell about it, seemed to affect her more than any of the tactical details. Is Thompson available to speak with me? She asked quietly. Admiral Richardson exchanged glances with one of the other officers before responding. Thompson is currently undergoing medical treatment for his injuries, but he has specifically requested permission to speak with you when he's released from the hospital. He wanted you to know that Danny saved his life, and he wants to make sure you understand exactly how that happened. The admission created a moment of profound silence in the room. Everyone present understood that they were witnessing something extraordinary, a young widow's determination to understand her husband's sacrifice, regardless of the emotional cost to herself. Marcus realized that he was observing a level of courage that matched anything described in the tactical briefings. Elena Rodriguez was choosing to face painful truths rather than accept comfortable platitudes, and her strength was affecting everyone in the room. Master Chief Martinez spoke into the silence. Admiral, Elena, and I would appreciate hearing about Danny's specific actions during the mission. We understand it may be difficult, but she has a right to know how her husband conducted himself in his final hours. What followed was the most detailed and emotionally challenging part of the entire briefing. Admiral Richardson, with occasional input from other officers who had reviewed the after-action reports, described the sequence of events that led to Rodriguez's death. The rescue operation had begun successfully, with the team locating the 3 American hostages and beginning the extraction process. But the terrorist forces had responded more quickly and in greater numbers than anticipated. What should have been a swift insertion and extraction had turned into a prolonged firefight in an urban environment. Danny and Thompson were responsible for securing the extraction route, Admiral Richardson explained. When the team encountered heavier resistance than expected, they had to hold a position that came under direct fire from multiple directions. Thompson was hit by shrapnel from a grenade, and Danny was ordered to fall back with him to the extraction point. Elena listened with absolute focus, her questions now coming at critical moments. Admiral, you said Danny was ordered to fall back. Did he follow that order? No, ma'am, he did not. Danny helped Thompson reach a covered position, but then he returned to his original firing position. According to Thompson's statement, Danny said that the hostages and the rest of the team needed more time to reach the extraction point safely. The room fell completely silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. Marcus could see that several of the senior officers were struggling with their own emotions as they listened to Admiral Richardson describe the final minutes of Rodriguez's life. For the next 47 minutes, Danny maintained a position that allowed him to provide covering fire for his team and the rescued hostages. He was wounded during this period, we believe by shrapnel from another explosive device, but he continued to engage enemy forces and coordinate with the helicopter extraction team. Elena's voice was barely above a whisper when she asked, "How do you know he was wounded? Did someone see it happen?" Thompson observed it through binoculars from his position. He said Danny never indicated that he was hit. He just continued with his mission. It was only later, when they were able to examine the position where Danny had been fighting, that they could see evidence of his injury. The clinical language couldn't disguise the human reality of what was being described. Marcus found himself imagining those final 47 minutes. A young sailor, wounded and alone, holding a position against overwhelming odds so that others could escape to safety. The bravery required for such actions was almost incomprehensible. Master Chief Martinez asked the question that everyone in the room was thinking. "Admiral, in your professional opinion, did Danny know that his position was essentially hopeless? Did he understand that staying behind significantly decreased his own chances of survival?" Admiral Richardson's response was immediate and unequivocal. "Master Chief, based on all available evidence and the statements of his teammates, Petty Officer Rodriguez understood exactly what he was doing. He made a conscious choice to prioritize the safety of others over his own survival. In the special operations community, we call that the highest form of military service." Elena had been sitting very still throughout this exchange, but now she looked up directly at Admiral Richardson. "How did it end? How did my husband die?" The question was asked with such quiet dignity that it seemed to demand complete honesty in response. Admiral Richardson met her gaze steadily before answering. "Danny was killed by sniper fire in the final minutes of the extraction operation." Thompson reported that the last radio transmission they received from him indicated that the hostages and team members had reached the helicopter safely. Danny's final words were, "Package secure, mission complete." The impact of those final words, "package secure, mission complete," resonated throughout the room. Even in the moment of his death, Rodriguez had been focused on mission success rather than his own survival. It was a level of dedication that transcended normal understanding of duty and service. Elena closed her eyes for a long moment, and when she opened them again, Marcus could see a mixture of grief and pride that was almost overwhelming to witness. "Thank you, Admiral. I needed to know that Danny died the way he lived, focused on others rather than himself." The afternoon session continued with discussions of the decorations Rodriguez would receive and the support available to his family. But the emotional center of the briefing had been Elena's quiet insistence on understanding the full truth about her husband's sacrifice. As the formal proceedings concluded and participants began to leave, Marcus remained at his station, deeply affected by everything he had witnessed. Elena Rodriguez's courage in facing painful truths had been as impressive as any heroism described in the tactical briefings. She had chosen understanding over comfort, truth over consolation. But the afternoon was not quite over. As the room emptied, Elena approached Admiral Richardson for a private conversation, and Marcus found himself the only other person remaining in the briefing room. What he was about to witness would change everything he thought he knew about honor, sacrifice, and the bonds that connect those who serve. As the last of the senior officers filed out of the briefing room, Marcus began his routine cleanup, quietly collecting coffee cups and organizing documents that would need to be secured. He moved with practiced efficiency, but his attention was divided between his duties and the conversation taking place near the conference table. Elena Rodriguez stood facing Admiral Richardson, with Master Chief Martinez beside her for support. The chaplain and casualty assistance officer had stepped into the hallway to give the family some privacy, but they remained visible through the glass partition, ready to provide assistance if needed. "Admiral, Elena began, her voice steady despite the emotional weight of the afternoon. "I have a request that may seem unusual, but it's important to me and would have been important to Danny." Admiral Richardson nodded, his expression indicating that he was prepared to consider whatever she might ask. "Please go ahead, Mrs. Rodriguez." Elena took a deep breath before continuing. "I want to meet with Danny's team, specifically with Petty Officer Thompson when he's recovered enough for visitors. But more than that, I want to do something for the entire SEAL community that acknowledges what they do and the risks they take." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "Danny used to tell me about the brotherhood among special operations personnel. He said it wasn't just about the missions they accomplished, but about the promise they made to each other that no one would be left behind and that their families would be taken care of if something happened." Master Chief Martinez nodded approvingly. "Elena, that's exactly right. The brotherhood Danny talked about is real, and it extends beyond just the operational units. It includes all the support personnel, the families, and the community that makes special operations possible." Admiral Richardson leaned forward slightly. "Mrs. Rodriguez, what specifically did you have in mind?" "I want to establish a foundation in Danny's name, something that provides practical support to special operations families. Not just financial assistance, though that's important, but also educational support for children, counseling services for families dealing with deployment stress, and career assistance for spouses who have to constantly relocate." The scope and thoughtfulness of her proposal clearly impressed Admiral Richardson. "That's a significant undertaking, Mrs. Rodriguez. Have you given thought to the logistics and funding requirements for such an organization?" Elena smiled for the first time since entering the briefing room. "Admiral, I may be a young widow, but I'm also a college graduate with a degree in nonprofit management. Before Danny and I got married, I worked for several charitable organizations. I understand what's involved in creating and running a foundation." Master Chief Martinez added, "Admiral, Elena has been thinking about this for weeks. She's not making an emotional decision. This is a carefully considered plan to honor Danny's memory while addressing real needs in the special operations community." As Marcus continued his cleanup duties, he found himself deeply moved by Elena's determination to transform her grief into something constructive. Here was a young woman who could have chosen to retreat into private mourning, but instead was proposing to dedicate herself to supporting others in situations similar to her own. Admiral Richardson was clearly taking her proposal seriously. "Mrs. Rodriguez, the Pentagon has policies about endorsing private organizations, but there may be ways to provide informal support and guidance. I'd be willing to connect you with other military spouses who have successfully established similar foundations." "Thank you, Admiral. That would be very helpful. But I also have a more immediate request, something that relates directly to what we discussed today." Elena glanced briefly at Marcus, who was organizing documents at the far end of the room, then looked back at Admiral Richardson. "I want to personally thank every member of Danny's team for bringing those hostages home safely. I know that military protocol doesn't typically allow for civilian interaction with special operations personnel, but I think it would be meaningful for them to hear from me directly." The request created a moment of silence as Admiral Richardson considered the implications. Special operations units maintained strict security protocols that limited their interaction with outsiders, even family members of fallen teammates. But Elena's request came from such a genuine place of gratitude and understanding that it seemed to transcend normal policy considerations. "Mrs. Rodriguez," Admiral Richardson said carefully, "I can't promise anything immediately, but I will discuss your request with the appropriate commanders. The men who served with Danny have been deeply affected by his loss, and hearing from you might actually be beneficial for their own healing process." Elena nodded gratefully. "I understand that security considerations come first, Admiral. I just want them to know that Danny's sacrifice wasn't just about saving those hostages. It was about living up to the promise he made to his teammates. He died knowing that his actions would bring everyone else home safely." Marcus paused in his duties, struck by the profound understanding Elena demonstrated of her husband's motivations. She wasn't viewing his death as a senseless tragedy, but as the fulfillment of a commitment to his brothers in arms. It spoke to a level of maturity and insight that was remarkable for someone so young and dealing with such profound loss. Master Chief Martinez spoke into the thoughtful silence that followed. Admiral, if I may offer a perspective from someone who spent 30 years in the Navy, what Elena is describing goes to the heart of what military service means. Danny died doing his job, but more importantly, he died fulfilling his obligation to his teammates and to innocent people who needed protection. I agree completely, Master Chief. The challenge is finding ways to honor that sacrifice while maintaining the security requirements that protect other operators who are still in harm's way. Elena nodded understandingly. Admiral, I wouldn't want to compromise anyone's safety. Perhaps there's a way to arrange something that doesn't involve revealing identities or specific operational details. I just think it's important for Danny's teammates to know that his family understands and appreciates what they do. As this conversation continued, Marcus realized he was witnessing something extraordinary. Elena Rodriguez was demonstrating a level of grace and purpose under the most difficult circumstances imaginable. Rather than being consumed by grief or anger, she was channeling her emotions into constructive action that would honor her husband's memory while helping others. Admiral Richardson seemed to reach a decision. Mrs. Rodriguez, let me make some inquiries with the appropriate commands. I can't guarantee anything, but your request comes from such an obvious place of respect and gratitude that I believe we can find a way to accommodate it appropriately. Thank you, Admiral. That means more to me than you can imagine. Elena then turned toward Marcus, who had been quietly observing while completing his duties. Excuse me, Petty Officer, she said, reading his name tag. Petty Officer Chun, I hope you don't mind that I noticed you during today's briefing. Marcus straightened immediately, uncertain about proper protocol for addressing a Gold Star wife. Ma'am, not at all. Is there something I can help you with? Actually, yes, there is. I noticed that you seemed very affected by what you heard today about my husband. I wanted to thank you for your respectful attention and for the care you showed in supporting today's briefing. The unexpected recognition left Marcus momentarily speechless. He had assumed his presence was largely invisible to the main participants, but Elena had clearly observed his reactions throughout the day. Ma'am, I was just doing my job, Marcus replied. But I want you to know that hearing about your husband's service and sacrifice it's been an honor. I've never been in combat, and I realize now that people like your husband carry a burden that most of us never fully understand. Elena smiled warmly at his honesty. Petty Officer Chun, the military is a team effort. Danny used to say that everyone in uniform contributes to the mission, whether they're carrying a rifle in combat or serving coffee at the Pentagon. He respected all forms of military service. Master Chief Martinez added, Son, if I may offer some perspective, what you do here matters more than you might realize. The senior officers who make decisions about missions like the one that cost Danny his life depend on people like you to support their work. That's not a small responsibility. Admiral Richardson nodded in agreement. Master Chief Martinez is absolutely right, Petty Officer Chun. Effective military operations depend on thousands of people performing their duties with professionalism and dedication, often without recognition or glory. Your service enables the mission success that people like Petty Officer Rodriguez died to achieve. The recognition from such senior personnel was overwhelming for Marcus, but more importantly, it was coming from the widow of the fallen SEAL whose story had so profoundly affected him. Elena's ability to see value in all forms of service, even while grieving her husband's loss, demonstrated a perspective that was both generous and wise. Mrs. Rodriguez, Marcus said, finding his voice again, if you don't mind me saying so, your husband would be very proud of how you're handling the situation. Your strength and dignity today have been impressive to everyone in this room. Elena's composure wavered slightly at his words, but she maintained her self-control. Thank you, Petty Officer Chun. That means a great deal coming from someone who serves in the same military that Danny loved so much. Admiral Richardson glanced at his watch, clearly mindful of security protocols and the need to conclude the extended briefing. Mrs. Rodriguez, Master Chief Martinez, I want to thank you both for participating in today's session. Having you here has reminded all of us why we do this work and what's at stake when we make operational decisions. Admiral, Elena replied, thank you for being willing to share the truth about Danny's final mission. It wasn't easy to hear, but it was necessary for me to understand. I hope that somehow this briefing helps prevent other families from going through what we're experiencing. As the participants began to prepare for departure, Elena made one final request that surprised everyone in the room. Admiral, I know this may sound strange, but would it be possible for me to have a few minutes alone in this room? This is where I learned the details of how my husband died, and I'd like to have a moment to process that privately. The request was unusual, but Admiral Richardson immediately nodded his understanding. Of course, Mrs. Rodriguez. Take all the time you need. Security will ensure you're not disturbed. As Admiral Richardson, Master Chief Martinez, and the other personnel filed out of the room, Elena remained seated at the conference table where she had listened to the details of her husband's sacrifice. Marcus hesitated near the door, uncertain whether he should leave as well or remain to provide any assistance she might need. Elena noticed his uncertainty and spoke quietly. Petty Officer Chun, if you have a few more minutes, would you mind staying? I don't want to be completely alone, but I also don't need anyone to try to comfort me. I just need someone who understands military service to be present while I say goodbye to this room. Marcus nodded immediately. Yes, ma'am. I'll stay as long as you need. What followed was one of the most profound 10 minutes of Marcus's military service. Elena sat quietly at the conference table, sometimes looking at the screens that still displayed information about her husband's final mission, sometimes simply staring at her hands folded in her lap. She didn't cry or speak, but Marcus could sense the intense emotional processing taking place. Finally, she stood and walked to the front of the room where Rodriguez's photograph was still displayed on the main screen. She looked up at the image of her husband in his navy dress blues, his confident smile frozen in time. Danny, she said softly, speaking directly to the photograph, I understand now what happened to you, and I'm proud of the choice you made. You did exactly what you trained to do, and you saved people who needed saving. I'm going to miss you every day for the rest of my life, but I'm going to honor your memory by taking care of the community you loved. She paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. I promise you that our daughter will know who her father was and what he stood for. And I promise that I'll do everything I can to support the families of the men and women who served the way you did. Elena turned away from the screen and walked back toward the door, where Marcus waited respectfully. Thank you for staying, Petty Officer Chun. Having someone here who understands military service made this easier. Ma'am, it was an honor to be here with you. Your husband would be proud of your strength. As they walked together toward the door, Elena stopped and looked back at the briefing room one final time. This room holds the truth about Danny's death, but it also holds the truth about his life and what he believed in. I'm grateful that I had the chance to hear that truth, even though it was painful. Marcus held the door for her as they exited into the hallway, where Master Chief Martinez and the chaplain waited to escort her back through the Pentagon's security checkpoints. But before they left, Elena turned to Marcus one more time. Petty Officer Chun, I hope you'll remember today not just as a briefing about a mission gone wrong, but as a reminder of why military service matters. Danny used to say that freedom isn't free, and that someone has to be willing to pay the price. Today, you heard about someone who paid that price willingly and completely. As Elena Rodriguez walked away through the Pentagon corridors, flanked by her father-in-law and the support personnel assigned to help her through this difficult day, Marcus remained standing outside the briefing room. The day had begun as a routine assignment serving coffee to senior officers. It was ending as one of the most meaningful experiences of his military career. But the day wasn't quite over yet. As Marcus prepared to return to the briefing room to complete his duties, Admiral Richardson appeared in the corridor, apparently having waited for Elena's departure before approaching Marcus directly. "Petty Officer Chun," the Admiral said, "walk with me for a moment." As they moved through the Pentagon's corridors, Admiral Richardson spoke quietly about duty, service, and the unexpected ways that military personnel could find themselves contributing to something larger than themselves. What he was about to tell Marcus would complete the transformation that had begun with the morning briefing about Petty Officer Rodriguez's sacrifice. As they walked through the Pentagon's corridors, Admiral Richardson maintained the steady pace of someone accustomed to navigating the building's complex layout while conducting important conversations. Marcus matched his stride, uncertain about where they were going, but understanding that this was an opportunity that might never come again. Private time with one of the Navy's most senior leaders. "Petty Officer Chun," Admiral Richardson began, "I wanted to speak with you privately because I observed something today that I think you should understand." During the briefing, particularly when Mrs. Rodriguez was present, you demonstrated a level of empathy and professionalism that went beyond simple military bearing. Marcus wasn't sure how to respond to such unexpected recognition. "Sir, I was just trying to do my job appropriately." Admiral Richardson paused at a junction in the corridor, turning to face Marcus directly. "Son, let me share something with you that I've learned in 35 years of military service. There's a difference between doing your job and understanding your purpose. Today, you began to understand your purpose." They resumed walking, passing offices where other military personnel were conducting the routine business of national defense. But Admiral Richardson's words had created a sense of privacy and significance that made their conversation feel separate from the surrounding activity. "Petty Officer Chun, what did you think about Mrs. Rodriguez's request to meet with her husband's teammates?" The question caught Marcus off guard, not because it was difficult to answer, but because he hadn't expected a flag officer to ask for his opinion on such a sensitive matter. "Sir, I thought it showed remarkable courage and understanding. She could have chosen to remember her husband in a more comfortable way, but she insisted on knowing the truth. And her desire to thank his teammates shows that she understands military service in a way that many civilians don't." Admiral Richardson nodded approvingly. "That's exactly right. Elena Rodriguez demonstrated something today that we don't see often enough: the ability to transform personal grief into a larger understanding of service and sacrifice. Her response to tragedy shows the same kind of character that her husband displayed in combat." They turned into a less traveled section of the Pentagon, where the corridors were quieter and the offices fewer. Admiral Richardson seemed to be leading them somewhere specific, but he was clearly in no hurry to arrive at their destination. "Chun, let me ask you another question. When you enlisted in the Navy, what did you think military service would be like?" Marcus considered the question carefully before responding. "Sir, I thought it would be more dramatic, I suppose. I expected action, adventure, maybe deployments to interesting places. I didn't expect to spend most of my time serving coffee and filing documents in a building in Virginia." Admiral Richardson chuckled softly. "That's an honest answer, and it's probably what most young sailors think when they enlist. But here's what I want you to understand. What you experienced today was more significant than most combat deployments. You witnessed the human cost of military operations, and you saw how a family chooses to honor that sacrifice." They stopped outside an office that Marcus didn't recognize, with a simple nameplate that read Admiral Richardson. Marcus realized they had been walking toward the Admiral's private office, though he couldn't imagine why he was being brought there. "Sir, I'm not sure I understand why today was so significant for me personally." Admiral Richardson opened the door and gestured for Marcus to enter. The office was larger than Marcus had expected, with windows overlooking the Pentagon's inner courtyard. Military awards and photographs lined the walls, displaying a career that had spanned decades and multiple conflicts. But what struck Marcus most was how personal the space felt. Family photographs, books that showed signs of being regularly read, and mementos that spoke of relationships rather than just achievements. "Sit down, Chun," Admiral Richardson said, indicating a chair facing his desk. "I want to show you something that relates to today's briefing." Admiral Richardson opened a desk drawer and withdrew a folder that was clearly personal rather than official. 23 years ago, I was a young lieutenant commander serving on the USS Cole when it was attacked by terrorists in Yemen. 17 sailors were killed, including my best friend and roommate from the Naval Academy. Marcus listened intently as Admiral Richardson opened the folder, revealing photographs, letters, and documents that were obviously treasured personal items. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell was one of the finest officers I ever served with, and one of the best people I ever knew. She was killed instantly when the bomb exploded, along with 16 other sailors who were simply doing their jobs on what should have been a routine port visit. Admiral Richardson handed Marcus a photograph showing two young naval officers in dress blues, clearly taken during happier times. That's Sarah and me at our 10-year Academy reunion, just 6 months before she was killed. She was excited about her upcoming promotion and her plans to command her own ship someday. The personal nature of what Admiral Richardson was sharing created an intimacy that transcended their difference in rank. Marcus realized he was being trusted with something deeply meaningful to the Admiral, though he still wasn't sure why. "Sir, I'm honored that you're sharing this with me, but I'm not sure I understand the connection to today's briefing." Admiral Richardson smiled sadly. "The connection is this, Chun. When Sarah was killed, her husband faced the same choice that Elena Rodriguez is facing now. He could have chosen to retreat into private grief, to blame the Navy for putting his wife in danger, or to become bitter about the loss of their future together." Admiral Richardson turned a page in the folder, revealing letters written in a careful, feminine handwriting. Instead, he chose to honor Sarah's memory by supporting other military families dealing with similar losses. He established a scholarship fund for children of sailors killed in terrorist attacks, and he volunteered with casualty assistance programs to help other families navigate the bureaucracy of military death benefits. Marcus began to understand where Admiral Richardson was leading the conversation. "Sir, are you saying that Elena Rodriguez might make a similar choice?" "I'm saying she's already making that choice, Chun. Her request to establish a foundation, her desire to thank her husband's teammates, her insistence on understanding the truth about his death. All of that shows someone who is choosing to transform tragedy into something constructive." Admiral Richardson closed the folder and looked directly at Marcus. "But here's what I want you to understand about your role in all of this. Today, you weren't just serving coffee to senior officers. You were supporting a process that helps military families find meaning in sacrifice. Your professionalism and empathy contributed to Elena Rodriguez's ability to process her grief and make constructive choices about her future." The weight of Admiral Richardson's words was almost overwhelming. Marcus had never considered that his routine duties might have such significance, that his small role in supporting high-level briefings could contribute to something as important as helping a widow transform grief into purpose. "Sir, I never thought about my job that way. Most people don't, Chun, and that's why I wanted to speak with you privately. Military service isn't just about the dramatic moments, the combat operations, the heroic sacrifices, the medal-worthy actions. It's also about the accumulation of small acts of professionalism and dedication that create an environment where important work can be done." Admiral Richardson stood and walked to his office window, looking out at the Pentagon courtyard where hundreds of military and civilian personnel moved about their daily duties. "Chin, let me tell you something that might sound philosophical, but it's based on decades of experience in leadership positions. Every person in uniform, regardless of rank or assignment, contributes to the overall mission of defending this country. But more than that, every person in uniform has opportunities to demonstrate the values that make military service meaningful." Marcus joined Admiral Richardson at the window, looking out at the complex of buildings that housed the Department of Defense. "Sir, what values are you referring to?" "Honor, courage, commitment. The Navy's core values, but also deeper principles like integrity, selflessness, and dedication to something larger than yourself. Today, you demonstrated all of those values simply by performing your duties with genuine care and respect for the people you were serving." Admiral Richardson turned away from the window and faced Marcus directly. Chun, I'm going to share something with you that I want you to remember for the rest of your military career. Elena Rodriguez told me privately, after the briefing concluded, that your respectful attention throughout the day helped her feel that her husband's sacrifice was truly understood and appreciated by the military community. The revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow. He had assumed his presence was largely invisible, that his reactions to the briefing were unnoticed by the main participants. The idea that Elena Rodriguez had specifically observed and appreciated his behavior was both humbling and inspiring. Sir, I don't know what to say. I was just trying to be respectful during what I knew was a difficult situation for her. Exactly, Chun. You were just trying to be respectful. But that just represents something profound. In a world where many people are focused on their own interests and advancement, you instinctively chose to prioritize respect for others over personal comfort or convenience. Admiral Richardson returned to his desk and opened another folder, this one containing official documents. Chun, I've been reviewing your service records since this morning. Your performance evaluations are consistently strong, but more importantly, your supervisors consistently note your professionalism and reliability. Marcus felt a mixture of pride and uncertainty about where this conversation was leading. Thank you, sir. I've tried to do my best in every assignment. I can see that, son. But I think you're ready for something more challenging than serving coffee at briefings, no matter how important those briefings might be. Admiral Richardson withdrew a document from the folder and placed it on his desk where Marcus could see it. Chun, how would you feel about an assignment that would put you in direct contact with military families dealing with loss and trauma? The question was so unexpected that Marcus needed a moment to process it. Sir, what kind of assignment are you referring to? The Navy has a program called the Casualty Assistance Calls Program. CACP officers provide support to families of sailors who have been killed, injured, or reported missing. It's demanding work that requires emotional maturity, professional competence, and the ability to help people navigate some of the most difficult experiences of their lives. Marcus felt his heart rate increase as he began to understand what Admiral Richardson was suggesting. Sir, are you offering me an opportunity to work in that program? I'm more than offering, Chun. I'm personally recommending you for training as a CACP officer. Based on what I observed today, I believe you have the character and empathy necessary to succeed in that role. The magnitude of what was being offered was almost overwhelming. Marcus would be moving from routine administrative duties to one of the most emotionally challenging and meaningful assignments available to junior enlisted personnel. Sir, I'm honored by your confidence, but I have to ask, am I qualified for such an important assignment? I don't have any formal training in counseling or family support services. Admiral Richardson smiled. Chun, the Navy provides extensive training for CCP officers, covering everything from grief counseling to military benefits and bureaucratic procedures. But the most important qualification, the ability to genuinely care about people who are suffering, isn't something that can be taught. Either you have it or you don't. You clearly have it. Admiral Richardson paused, allowing Marcus time to absorb the implications of what was being discussed. Chun, let me be clear about what this assignment would involve. You would be responsible for notifying families when sailors are killed, injured, or missing. You would help them navigate the complex process of military benefits and funeral arrangements. You would be present during some of the worst moments of their lives, and you would need to provide both practical assistance and emotional support. The sobering nature of the responsibilities was evident, but Marcus found himself increasingly drawn to the opportunity. Today's experience with Elena Rodriguez had shown him that military families needed support from people who understood military service and could provide both competence and compassion during crisis situations. Sir, if you believe I'm capable of handling such responsibilities, I would be honored to accept the assignment. Admiral Richardson nodded approvingly. I thought you might say that, Chun, but I want you to take some time to think about it seriously. This isn't just a career opportunity. It's a commitment to serving military families during their most vulnerable moments. Once you begin that work, those families will depend on you completely. Marcus didn't need time to think about it. Today's experience had clarified something fundamental about his understanding of military service. He wanted to contribute to something meaningful, something that honored the sacrifice of people like Petty Officer Rodriguez by ensuring their families received the support they needed and deserved. Sir, I don't need additional time to consider your offer. After what I witnessed today, I understand that military service is about supporting each other and taking care of the families of those who make the ultimate sacrifice. I want to be part of that mission. Admiral Richardson extended his hand across the desk. Welcome to the Real Navy, Petty Officer Chun. Your assignment to CCP training will be effective immediately. As Marcus shook Admiral Richardson's hand, he realized that his transformation from a young sailor serving coffee to someone entrusted with supporting military families in crisis had been completed. The day that began with routine briefing room duty was ending with a commitment to honor the sacrifice of fallen warriors by caring for those they left behind. But Admiral Richardson had one more piece of guidance to offer, something that would frame Marcus's understanding of his new responsibilities and prepare him for the challenges ahead.